Guys, Rufus's Fury, arguably one of the best weapons you can get from the raid, a 720 round per minute auto rifle that shoots strand. And if you know anything about the season, guys, strand weapons with our artifact mods are so good. Now today I want to answer some questions in this review. What is the God Roll for PvE and for PvP? Secondly, does this weapon outperform other weapons within its own archetype and against other strand weapons? Because we have other options. And third, and the most important question, who in the hell is Rufus? And why is he angry? Today, guys, let's dive into the random rolls on this auto rifle. By the way, this is a craftable weapon. There will also be an adept version of this weapon when the master mode of the raid comes out. And not only will it have adept level stats, but you'll be able to apply adept mods, and you'll be able to take the traits that you get on your random roll and level it up and enhance those traits. So understand, guys, what you're seeing here is good, but this is the base form. This auto rifle is only going to get better. Now, I had a few rolls on my account, but also utilized 5 heads roll, which had a very sexy PvP roll that I wanted to use, which was perpetual motion and tap the trigger. Now, this is a no-brainer roll for pretty much any weapon in the game, but it works so good here on this auto rifle. Perpetual motion, increasing our handling and reload speed as well as our stability at each stack. And you can see when you run into a scenario here where you're maxing out stats. And tap the trigger, which increases stability and accuracy on the initial trigger pull. Now, I mainly wanted to utilize this roll inside of PvP just to see how it would work, almost like an extended version of a submachine gun. First thing you're gonna notice about using this auto rifle is that its consistency is honestly one of the best I have ever seen. And I have played with some very, and I mean very nasty auto rifles, especially in that 720 department. You have weapons like Sweet Sorrow, which is honestly one of the best auto rifles amongst 720s. And a huge reason for this is because you can get enhanced tap the trigger on that weapon. You also have things like perpetual motion, killing wind, and despite it having a 3.8 star rating inside of PvP, it is much better than what that rating reflects. But despite how good Sweet Sorrow feels, and really, despite how good a lot of other 720s feel, whether it's Chroma Rush, Crate, or hell, even Quicksilver, which is a 720, and it feels phenomenal, primarily because it has 100 stability, despite those weapons being amazing. Rufus puts out. Now, for PvP, I do believe that perpetual motion tap the trigger roll is always going to be your best roll. Matter of fact, the enhanced version of these traits are only going to make this auto rifle even better. And then when you start tacking on adept mods and the adept stat bumps, and then some range boosting perks, that particular roll right there, guys, is only going to get better. Now, keep in mind, even though this is an auto rifle, one of the biggest limiting factors to this archetype is your range. You may find yourself getting shredded in SMG range while using this weapon. The problem is these auto rifles don't really go that much further outside of that SMG range. They have a 0.77 time to kill value, but range-wise, things start to get very limited here at Rufus. Like, we're talking 25, maybe 26 meters, which is why the masterwork starts to become very important. Just simply changing the masterwork here to say a range masterwork can lift the weapon up an extra 1.5 meters. If you were to fully compensate here, you can get close to 28.5 meters. But again, guys, that's going to be somewhat of a stretch. It really comes down to our adept versions of these weapons, which will actually allow you to get up to that 29 meter mark, since we can then slap on an adept range mod. Again, one of the limiting factors here for all of these auto rifles is range, which is why Sweet Sorrow is in a good position because it has a base of 17 zoom, whereas things like Quicksilver Storm, Crate, Chroma Rush, they're all around that 16 zoom. And just to give you a point of reference here, if I was to fully compensate for range on Sweet Sorrow with a range masterwork, you'll be hitting full damage a little north of 29 meters. That's where the adept version though of this weapon comes into play. Again, a few weeks after the master mode version of the raid releases, we will then be able to get our adept weapons, level them up, and enhance with 3 different tiers. The first tier will replace our existing masterwork. So again, you'll be able to take that God Roll weapon, but say if it had a bad masterwork, boom. Enhancement tier 1 allows you to change that masterwork. So I know I'm stressing the adept version of these weapons over and over, but the reason why this excites me so much is because what you're seeing is only going to get better. Now, stat-wise, for my controller players, you'll be very pleased to see that this weapon has a whopping 82 aim assists. That's actually better than Crate, that's better than Sweet Sorrow, Chroma Rush, and it just comes in just slightly less than that of Quicksilver Storm, which has 83 aim assists. Granted, you can pick it up even further than that by slotting on a targeting mod. Now, the recoil direction on this weapon is a bit painful, approximately 56. Now, technically, this is somewhat vertical, but it has some leaning there to the right with some slight kickoff there to the left. Unfortunately, throwing on something like a counterbalance mod doesn't really help things all that much. It just kind of swaps sides. It puts it at 71 recoil direction. So instead of it leaning a little bit to the right, now it's just going to lean to the left a bit. Now, what you could do is you can actually do a counterbalance mod, then throw on extended barrel, giving us a recoil direction of 81, and it still has that slight kick to the right, but it definitely brings things down. Now, using something like extended barrel does hurt your handling, but it's really not that bad. There are ways around this. Dexterity mods. You may be rocking Ophidian Aspects, which is already cranking up that handling. No lie, guys, I would definitely take the trade-off here. Extended barrel, counterbalance mod, and even if you didn't rock a counterbalance mod, just having extended barrel, I think is a fantastic option, considering it's helping your range, it's helping your recoil direction, and just that one change in your barrel stat, you're looking at an extra 1.5 meters of range. Now, there's gonna be some people ask, Cross, what about arrowhead break? Well, I had a roll with arrowhead break. I used it, and don't get me wrong, it's good. You can get things pretty vertical up to 86. You could top things off with counterbalance at 100 recoil direction, which is perfect. However, when you do that, you're now in a situation that even if you had the best range stats possible, and your mag perk and your masterwork, not counting, say, an adept range mod, you're looking at an auto rifle here that can only reach up to 26 meters, maybe a hair over. Personally, that's just too close to Ikelos. And I don't know if you know this or not, but we are definitely in an SMG meta, at least here on PC still. The problem is you got Ikelos SMG that reaches up to crazy ranges with things like rangefinder. And if your weapon can't get north of like 27, 28 meters, unless you are just a nasty dueler in this sandbox, Ikelos is still gonna eat your lunch. So I know I'm like really stressing range here on Rufus, but you need it, guys, for a lot of reasons. For consistency, for bullet magnetism at those great ranges, for maximum damage. Any dip off in damage past its optimal range, and that TTK value of 0.77 seconds, you can kiss that goodbye. So the further you can stretch out the capabilities of this auto rifle, the better your odds at beating SMGs before they ever even enter their optimal range. Now I'm gonna briefly talk about the origin trait on this weapon called Harmonic Resonance. And this is actually gonna bring us into the PvE role that I want my PvE players to look for. It's like a set bonus for rocking multiple weapons with that same origin traits. You get things like increased reload speed, as well as handling. It also deals increased damage versus Tormentors, Lucent Hive, and Guardians using their supers. Now this actually stacks up to ×2 if you have a weapon with these same origin traits in each slot. So you have to run at least one weapon with the same origin traits. Now the damage buff is actually really nice. It's like a 3.3% increase in damage at ×1, 10% at ×2. But inside of PvP, we actually noticed there was not an increase in damage. And I know people are saying there could be some rounding of numbers. Nah, guys, for real. Again, we're gonna test on other weapons, but from our testing, we actually didn't see an increase there in damage, but instead saw an increase in range of our weapon, which I know doesn't make sense, but this is Destiny. But with that being said, it's obviously very beneficial to run multiple of these raid weapons to dip into Harmonic Resonance. Like, that's a pretty nice buff. Now, when we look at Rufus's Fury inside of PvE, the role that I landed, that's honestly my favorite role, is this Demolitionist Hatchling role. And I was actually rocking the new Warlock exotic, Swarmers, and essentially destroying a Tangle spawns a Threadling, but your Threadlings unravel targets that they damage. Now, when you actually destroy a Tangle, this spawns 2 Threadlings. But even beyond that, for Warlock specifically, you've got Weaver's Call, where casting your Rift will weave 3 Threadlings and deploy any Threadlings that you have perch. You also have Mind Spun Invocation, where you can consume your Threadling grenade and immediately generate 5 perched Threadlings. So you can imagine this in combination with Rufus. And when we start combining it with things like Thread of Generation, which generates grenade energy, Thread of Evolution, which enhances our Threadlings, you start getting some crazy, and I mean crazy, armies of Threadlings here. I'm also utilizing Thread of Rebirth, where our strand weapons and their final blows have a chance to create a Threadling, and also Thread of Propagation grants your strand weapons unraveling routes. You can imagine all of this with the artifact mod this season, where we have so many artifacts that dip into strand here, guys. It's insane synergy. Now again, that is my god roll for if I'm trying to go for that Threadling army. The other combination, which is actually a very interesting one, which I have yet to get the roll for, is a Reconstruction Target Lock roll. Now keep in mind, guys, even though this weapon is present in the kinetic slot, it is not doing the same damage output that kinetic weapons are doing. Strand and Stasis have the same multiplier. However, in Surge environments, and we have a season-wide Surge of Strand, a Reconstruction roll with Target Lock seems absolutely disgusting. Considering the size of the magazine that you have here, the fact that you can crank that up even more, and potentially, if we can get things like Adept Backup Mag on it, can you imagine this with, say, something like Axiom War Rig, and literally just laying on the trigger with the magazine size that Reconstruction brings it up to? And keep in mind, guys, with the craftable version of this weapon, and on top of that, the Adept version, you can get Enhanced Target Lock, giving us more damage per stack and capping out at 45% increase in damage versus 40% at its base. Now, with all of this being said, is this the strand weapon to be using this season? Because we have other options. We have Synchronic Roulette, we have Perpetualist, which is another auto rifle. I actually think Rufus is better than those weapons. And I know technically the DPS on Synchronic Roulette is better. You also have Nanotech Tracer Rockets, which is also really nice, but Rufus is already matching that level of lethality. You can also get that buff there in damage when rocking multiple of these these raid weapons. And on top of that, we're not even playing with the final version of this auto rifle. Again, that's not to say that those other strand weapons that are automatic weapons aren't good guns, but I think Rufus, especially for PvE, has too much in its arsenal that makes it a monster. So guys, that is my review here for this auto rifle. Let me know in the comments below what you think. And if you're just interested in knowing what the rolls are on each one of these raid weapons, feel free to check out this video right here. We'll have a link to it in the description. Well, fellas and ladies, thank you all for coming and watching. And as always,
slap that like button like your mama told you right.